Hello everyone, I'm Jacob Kaufman, I'm the Nerd on the Street, and today I would like to give a huge thank you to Apple. Alright, so this video is just sort of something I decided I should make today. I read about this happening today, and I thought I really need to make a video about this. So here's what's going on. You may have heard about a terrorist attack that occurred back in December of 2015 in San Bernardino, California. And that attack, it was made by a Pakistani couple, and one of them was an employee at the San Bernardino County Department of Public Health. There was an event happening at that department, I think it was a holiday party, and that employee left the party and he and his wife came back with guns. There were around 80 people at the party, and 14 people were killed during that attack and 22 were seriously injured. Now that event is terrible. It goes without saying. Every terrorist attack that happens is terrible. As you know, this is not a channel where I just come on here and talk about terrorist attacks. This is a channel where I talk about technology. How does this attack have anything to do with technology other than guns, which are a form of technology that I try to refrain from talking about on here? Well, fast forward 2 months, and this month, the FBI has been trying to access the iPhone of one of those terrorists. It is an iPhone 5C. And the FBI has been trying to get into that iPhone. They want to know who the terrorists were talking to and what they were saying, obviously. So the FBI has been going to Apple trying to get help unlocking this iPhone. And here's what Apple has been doing. Apple has been complying with all of the search warrants that the FBI has been bringing to them. Apple has made engineers available to the FBI telling them what they can do to track down what people are saying and try and track down people that they're investigating. And Apple has been offering the FBI ideas on how they can investigate terrorist plots. Now, though, the FBI is asking for even more. The terrorist who owned an iPhone 5C was using a passcode on his iPhone, and as I covered in an earlier episode of Nerd on the Street News, all iOS devices come encrypted by default. When you put a passcode on your iOS device, it's not just a passcode to open the home screen on the device. That passcode encrypts all of your files on the device so that nobody can access your files without that passcode. So obviously the FBI wants the passcode, they want to get into the device, and they can't just guess it because with the security settings built into iOS that the terrorist used, if anyone, including the FBI, puts in the wrong passcode 10 times into that phone, the phone will delete the encryption certificate, and that will make it impossible to ever recover the files. And this is how many common forms of encryption work. There's the file that you're encrypting, and then you've got your certificate or your key file, and then you've got your key code or your password. And it's the idea of security consists of something you know and something you have. The something you know is your passcode, your numerical password, and then the something you have is the security key file. So you need both of those things to decrypt the file, and the FBI right now has neither of them, and if they try to input the passcode on the iPhone and it fails 10 times, it will delete the certificate file, making it so the FBI will never be able to access those files at all. Now that is a feature that I applauded, and many people applauded Apple for building into their iPhone. Android devices also come encrypted by default right now. And that is good for privacy and that is good for security because it means that not only can the government not get into everyone's files, but also hackers can't get into people's files. Criminals can't get into files that don't belong to them because everything is encrypted by default. Users don't need to have advanced knowledge of encryption. All they have to do is set up a passcode on their device. Now the FBI, attempting to use this terrible case as a guilt trip, they have asked Apple to basically bypass the encryption on the iPhone. And you might be asking, how is Apple going to do that? It's mathematically impossible to bypass encryption. What they're asking Apple to do is they're asking Apple to make a custom version of iOS that does not include that 10 code limit. So they're asking Apple to create a version of iOS that you can guess the password as many times as you want to, and it will not delete the security certificate, even if the person has put that setting in their iPhone settings that says only 10 trials allowed. They're asking Apple to do that. They're also asking Apple in that new version of iOS to allow inputting numbers electronically. So rather than having somebody sit there and type 00000001, rather than having somebody sit there and type in all of the possible passcodes manually, they want to be able to plug a computer into the iPhone, have a computer run through all of the tens of thousands of possible combinations instantaneously, and they want to get into that iPhone. They want Apple to put those two features, the electronic input of passcodes and the removal of the passcode trial limit. They want Apple to put those two things into a new version of iOS, apply it as an update to this one iPhone, and they want free reign to get into this iPhone. Apple said no, because Apple cares about its users' data. I'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, the FBI asked Apple to do this. Apple said no. The FBI actually went to court and got a court order for Apple to unlock this iPhone. Not just to unlock it, remember, they're asking Apple to make a custom version of iOS that allows unlocking it. So the FBI got a court order ordering Apple to create this custom version of iOS. Apple still said no. And that happened just yesterday. Apple put out a public letter to the FBI. The letter is signed by Tim Cook, and it is explaining all of this and explaining why Apple is refusing to cooperate with this court order. Now, at this moment, Apple does have some legal things they can do to continue pushing this case without actually breaking the law. You see, Apple can argue to the court that having to create this custom version of iOS would create an undue burden on the company that they are not obligated to provide to anyone, including the government, and they can argue that this request is unreasonable. Now, if the court still says, no, this request is reasonable, Apple is going to appeal this to the next court. It's going to be a court of appeals. Right now, it's in a district court in California. And Apple can continue to appeal this case, and there are several different courts that can say, no, you lose this case, and Apple can appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court. And if they lose this case in the Supreme Court, then they're going to have to make the decision, we either need to comply with this or we need to civilly disobey the law. Now, there are a lot of people going both ways on this issue, and how it seems to be panning out is most politicians want Apple to comply with this court order. And most technology-oriented people, most people who actually know how to use a computer, know what encryption is and how it works, most of those people do not want Apple to comply with this order. Clearly, I am in the second group. I'm not going to keep you wondering that because you probably already know. I've spoken out in the past about how encryption, it is legal right now, and it is impossible to make it illegal because it is math, and the government has no right to make math illegal. Courts have ruled in previous cases and set precedents that encryption algorithms are part of free speech. Encryption algorithms are allowed to be published without asking the government first. But even though they're allowed to be published, the FBI does not want us using them at all. Because this one terrorist had an iPhone, and that one iPhone was encrypted. Now the FBI is saying, Apple, create this version of iOS to unlock this one iPhone. Just this one iPhone. And we won't use it for anyone else's iPhone. We won't use it to investigate the person down the street who might be selling drugs. We won't use it to investigate the person, around the corner that might be whistleblowing in some national agency. The FBI is saying we are only going to use this version of iOS one time. We're going to use it for this terrorist's phone. Because even though we've caught the terrorist, we know exactly who committed the crime, we still want to gather more information about what happened and why. Now, Apple, in their public letter, is basically saying the government cannot guarantee, it cannot possibly guarantee that this version of iOS will never be used again. The next time somebody with an iPhone commits a terrorist attack, the FBI is just going to call Apple up again and say, hey, Apple, bring that version of iOS back and give it to us because we need to get into this iPhone. And once you start doing that with terrorists, it's a really slippery slope because there is a wide spectrum of crimes out there. Some of them are extremely immoral, and some of them ride the line on being moral or immoral. Apple is saying we are not going to allow the United States government to access everyone's iPhones. just because of this one terrorist. They're taking a lot of heat on this. Both Democrats and Republicans are saying that Apple needs to comply with the court order, do what the government says. I've heard the quote, "Who do they think they are?" And you know who they think they are? They think that they're Apple, the company who created the iPhone, the company who made smartphones what they are today, the company who made graphical user interfaces on computers what they are today. They're the company who's done more than the United States government has in the past 20 years. That's who they think they are. And right now they're about to undergo a legal battle, and they're trying to make it as transparent and as public as possible from what I can tell just researching this today. Like I said, this is a developing story. Apple just published this letter yesterday, and I'm going to be following it closely because if the government is able to force Apple into not just unlocking a phone, but creating the key to unlocking all of their phones, if they're able to do that, that's going to set a precedent that the government is not only allowed to force Apple to unlock phones, now they can force Google to unlock all of the Android phones, they can force Microsoft to unlock Windows computers. You get into a situation really fast where the United States government and all of the hackers and cyber criminals out there who are looking into these security holes that are being created for the United States government, they're all going to be able to access your personal files and my personal files and everyone's files. Now, I've actually read a few articles about how the FBI is making this case public on purpose. It's not just Apple bringing it to light, it's the FBI pushing this and trying to get the American public on the side of, we need to take down these terrorists so we can't have encryption on our devices anymore. The FBI would ideally like to create either a precedent in court that says, government agencies are allowed to force companies to unlock their users' data, unlock their users' devices. And the FBI would also like Congress to create laws saying that devices can't be sold encrypted out of the box, that encryption can't be turned on out of the box. And that's been a hotly contested issue for the year or two that it's been turned on. I don't have that many arguments for it because the argument is so simple. Once you open that door, it is open not just for legitimate use, but it's open to abuse. Corruption happens, and there can be people in the United States government who don't have people's best interests in hand. There can also be hackers out there. If Apple creates a security hole, any sort of security hole, if they create this master key, this special version of iOS for the FBI to use, no power in the world will keep hackers from getting at that version of iOS. And once this happens here in the United States, it's going to set a big precedent in other countries around the world. I mean, we're looking at if encryption is going to be found anywhere in a decade from now. In 10 years, will we still be allowed to have private files on our computers, or will we have to keep private information on a pencil and paper locked in a safe like we did 50 years ago? Terrorism is a terrible thing. It's going to happen. If the FBI opens up this iPhone, they might find some text messages to another terrorist, and they might stop that terrorist. It's still going to happen. We're letting more and more people into this country, and that can be a good thing. Even the people in this country aren't always mentally healthy. Terrorism is going to happen whether the law-abiding citizens of this country have privacy or not. And as a law-abiding citizen of the United States of America, I want to thank Apple for not just sitting down and complying with this court order, for actually fighting it and publicly stating that they are not going to comply with it. And just as a disclaimer, I don't use iOS. I do not own an iPhone. I own an Android phone, and the only reason why I own an Android phone is because I use Linux on the desktop. I don't use macOS on the desktop. I don't use any Apple products day to day. I don't use a single Apple product day to day. Now, every time I see Apple speaking out on privacy, every time I hear them talking about privacy, it makes me want to use Apple day to day for everything that I do because I trust Apple more than I trust Google. I trust Apple more than I trust Microsoft. And I trust Apple a lot more than I trust the United States government. Because I've heard the things that Tim Cook says about privacy. Apple just doesn't care what you're doing. It's none of their business. They acknowledge that. Now, I am a power user, and I know how to encrypt files manually. I know how to encrypt my own Linux hard drive, and even though I'm using Android on my phone, and even though that Android phone is hooked in with all of Google's services, as a power user, I do not do anything important on my phone. Anything that is marginally important to me, I do through one of my computers running Linux. Now, if you are not a power user and you do not want to deal with setting up Linux and running it, because as much as I and other Linux users pretend that it's easy, I know it can be really difficult sometimes. If you don't want to use Linux and you care about your privacy, I highly encourage you to use Apple's products, because at least for the time being, it seems they are really invested in keeping their customers' data safe, keeping their customers' privacy safe. Now, if in a month this reaches a higher court and that court orders Apple to develop this version of iOS and Apple does it, then all of this could change. This entire video could become irrelevant. But as someone who does not use Apple products on a regular basis, as someone who follows the legal battle over encryption and other legal battles over just privacy in general, I wanted to make this video, and I wanted to say that I am in support of Apple refusing to comply with the FBI's order to unlock this iPhone. Because once they unlock this iPhone, the FBI will be able to unlock any iPhone they want to. They'll be able to legally order Google to unlock any Android phone they want to. The government's going to be able to see all of your stuff, and then we're heading down a quick road to a dystopia. So thank you, Apple, and thank you, Tim Cook. I normally don't make one-day videos like this. I haven't done this in a really long time, where I hear about something and I come home and I immediately make a video about it. But I'm going to link this letter in the description of this video that Apple put out, and I've saved a copy of it, so if it goes down, I'll upload a mirror of it. I encourage you to read through this letter, because I wanted to bring this to your attention as a semi-journalist, as a YouTuber, and as someone who I know a lot of people listen to. I wanted to bring this to your attention that the FBI is fighting this case, and Apple is fighting this case. Apple is watching out for you. The United States government is trying to infringe on your personal rights, and Apple is the one watching out for you. That is, is it really all that unexpected anymore? Who knows? But yeah, that's what's going on. In case you've heard anything about the San Bernardino case and how Apple is now involved in it, now you're a little bit informed at least, and I highly encourage you to go read this letter, because like I said, Apple does a really good job of explaining how this is an irreversible thing, how if they comply with this order, it is really going to destroy electronic privacy. And when Congress finally gets around to trying to pass some dumb law banning encryption, I highly encourage you to contact your senators and your House representatives and tell them to vote no on that bill. If you have any questions about this topic, I'd love to hear them either here on YouTube or at my website over at nerdonthestreet.com. I know that this is a hot button issue because it involves privacy and terrorism and government overreach / citizen overreach, who has what rights, and I know people get really worked up about it, so I hope I don't offend anyone too much by making this video, but I felt it was something I had to do. So for now, I'm Jacob Kaufman, I'm the Nerd on the Street, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.